might sound a little woo-woo. The self inside of me is the same self that's inside of you. It's the same self inside of Sean. Hey, you have a steady job. Another part saying, but I don't like this job. Like we kind of live in the tension between parts struggles. And so in that, I'm helping the client build a relationship between those parts that haven't gotten as big of a say-so in their life.
Welcome, David. Very excited to chat about internal family systems. It's one of my favorite therapeutic models. I want you to tell listeners, who do you think internal family systems is helpful for?
I have found it almost universally accessible to the clients that I've worked with and the students I've taught for over the last 14, 15 years. It makes a lot of sense. Occasionally I'll get some pushback from people that don't quite like, oh, I don't really want to think about like through the lens of parts. So it hasn't worked for everybody, but just about everybody has had an intuitive like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. This helps me understand my internal world like immediately. And what a relief.
Yeah, I can echo that in my own experience. Internal family systems has been one of the most important models for me. It's very intuitive. I use it all the time personally when I'm experiencing pretty much any heavy emotional experience. And I've also used it to help other people in my life, loved ones, friends who are going through things. It's kind of like a gift, the gift that keeps on giving in a way. So I'm very, grateful to be able to share with more people. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you hope listeners take from today's conversation?
Yeah, I would love them to get a basic understanding of what this system is and to be able to recognize within themselves some of the patterns that you and I are going to be talking about and to be able to at the end be able to use the system, like take it live, like, oh, that's that part of me that's going into like blame. Ooh, that means something inside is going on in me. Some other part of me is really hurting, and there's this blaming part that's trying to mitigate the pain. Like I want them to, yeah, take away and be able to take it live within their own experience. One of the great things about it is very intuitive and accessible. So that's my hope.
I'm confident that will happen today, and I hope that it does for many people.
Too.
So we can't really talk about internal family systems without first talking about parts. So for people who are unfamiliar with this term, how would you describe what parts are?
Basic understanding of parts is your alarm clock goes off in the morning and one part of you wants to hit snooze and get more sleep. And another part is like, nope, we got to go to the gym. We got to get up and start our day. So we have different parts that want different things. And so fundamentally, in this IFS model and in parts models in general, like that's the human condition. We have different parts of us that want different things, that have different agendas and different motivations. So parts are the things that live in our heads that are constantly saying like, ooh, that looks good. I want that donut. And then another part says, nope, we want to be healthy. So parts are what goes on in our minds most of the time. You can look at it through the lens of parts.
What are some other common examples of parts in conflict that listeners might relate to help them understand parts a little bit more in practice?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many examples. Like parts in conflict. I'm going to do a relationship example of like, ugh, like there's a part of me that is kind of spinning about an interaction I had yesterday with my partner, right? Didn't feel good. And this part is like telling me all the things that they didn't like about the interaction, that they didn't like about what my partner said. And that part is like taking up a lot of space inside of me. And then there's another part of me that is like, oh, I don't want to bring this up. Like, what if the conversation doesn't go well? Like, this could make things worse. What if she gets defensive? Let's just not mess with this. Just let it go. Let it go. Right? It's not worth it to bring it up. And this part says, but I don't want it to fester. Like, I don't want to. I'm pulling away from her. I'm in. So, like, that's a common example most of us can relate to in a relationship. It's like frustration, and then like, oh, do I bring it up or not? Let's not bring it up. And so that's an example of two parts like struggling about whether or not an action should get taken. Right? Another one is like dissatisfaction at work. Like one part would say, hey, you have a steady job. Another part saying, but I don't like this job. I want something else. Like we kind of live in the tension between parts struggles. That's just like a truism of being a human. Like Martin Luther King Jr. said, we're somewhat of a schizophrenic personality, tragically divided against ourselves. I wouldn't say we're schizophrenic, but like we tend to be divided against ourselves. And this is what he's talking about, like parts taking different stands and then struggling amongst themselves to see what happens. And it's why most people live in this state of kind of, I think, mild anxiety or quiet desperation, Walt Whitman said, because we're unresolved inside of ourselves. And those are just a few practical examples of how it plays out in the day to day.
Yeah, those are great.
Yeah,
I think a natural question here, as an extension, that some people might be wondering is, where do these parts come from?
right. So we could talk for an hour about that, but for our purposes, let's say you're 5 years old and your mom is exhausted and you really need her attention, right? You really need her attention. And she's too stressed out and she says, I just don't have anything to give right now, right? So she has a moment, like as all moms do, right? We're not here to blame moms. And in that moment, the 5-year-old is jolted. And there's an association between like, oh, I need mom, but my need for mom causes her to like push me away, which is unbearable for me. So there's a part that is born in that moment that says, ooh, it's better. It's not okay to need mom if she seems stressed. All right. So I'm a new part. I just came into existence. And my job is to never have mom come at us that way again because it was so painful and jolting. So I'm going to learn to monitor mom and her mood and then only allow the need to come out if mom seems like she's in a good mood and we're going to get the thing that we need. Right. And so you can see that later in relationship. Oh, I'm going to track other people. And if it seems like they're tense, I'm not going to ask for what I need because I'm afraid I'm going to get that intense response. So that's one example of a way a part can come into being. And this part is called a protector. Like I want to protect us from ever having to be on the receiving end of mom's intensity again. So I'm going to become hyper vigilant to how she's doing. I'm going to maybe diminish my own need for her because I don't want that. Does that make sense? And a lot of them come in just culturally, like this is who we are and what we do. So a part learns to, be respectful to dad in a particular way, or to show up in a classroom and sit still. So they're learned through experience and they're learned through just cultural family conditioning. This is how we're supposed to be to get the outcome that we want. And we're all set up to avoid pain. We don't want the teacher to say, what are you doing? You're being a bad boy. So we learn how we need to be to avoid the stuff we don't want and to hopefully get the stuff that we do want. So parts come into existence to play this game of seeking the good and avoiding the bad and painful.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Very well said. And I think a lot of people can relate to, the vivid examples and pictures that you're painting.
Yeah.
And so it seems like these parts, right, they're forming through traumatic incidents, through cultural, just norms, right? So there's sort of these beliefs, coping mechanisms, strategies that form throughout our lives based on these significant either events or belief systems and structures that we exist within.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like ways that like mom and dad are proud of us. Like we're going to have a part that's like, wow, we want more of that. That feels amazing. And so that can give birth to a part that just really wants to do well and please others. And then if that part takes on too much power within the system as an adult, that person might not really know who they are deep inside because they're oriented around parts that want to perform to get the applause, but then they might not really be getting the deep nourishment or be expressing their truest selves. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah, that 100%
Yeah.
makes sense. And I want to dive deeper into this because I think this is really going to demonstrate the problem that a lot of people can relate to, and then we can get into how internal family systems IFS helps address
Right.
this. But so there are these parts that form throughout our lives, right, early on in these, different traumatic events or, cultural norms. And at some point, they stop serving us, right, because they're younger parts that don't necessarily need to get that need met in the same way anymore. Or we have multiple parts in conflict, right?
Yes.
Could you give an example or go a little bit deeper into what's the impact of having these parts that don't necessarily serve us anymore, and having multiple parts in conflict trying to help us navigate a difficult situation?
So that's a two-parter. So one example I
Yes.
can give from a client who, when she was around 11, she got a little bit chubby, and her, to use her words, and her mom said to her, like, "Whoa, like you've put on a lot of weight, and that's going to be a problem for you," right? And this isn't uncommon. And what immediately happened to this client is she went into like a terror response, like felt rejected by mom, felt like she was going to be rejected by friends and the world. And in that moment, another part of her came online and was like, no fucking way this is ever going to happen again. Right. Which is what parts do. Like, never again is the creed of the protector parts. And she started obsessively calorie counting. She started taking like gas station diet pills, which they used to sell back in the day. And it became the central theme of, I have to be thin. My body has to look a certain way. And that part did that from a really good intention. And one thing about IFS I love is it's not pathologizing, like there are no bad parts. So this part may have seemed really harsh and like, you have to count every calorie. You can't have that. Why did you eat that? What the, that part was very intense inside of her, but you can see the good intention. Like, this part is just trying to keep her from experiencing like humiliation, being shamed, being disapproved of by mom. So one of the things I love about IFS is we actually love and celebrate the parts that can even be like bullying to ourselves, because they're trying to help in the best way they know how. They're trying to help in the best way they know how. They're trying to prevent more pain. And so, she lived in this conflict of just like, I just want to, I want to be a kid. I want to be me. But there was this kind of harsh critic that was constantly running the show. And so, later in life, she was able to see that and then appreciate that part for the ways it was trying to help, but like have it stop being so dominating. And in the previous example I used, like the guy that worked so hard or the woman that worked so hard and the bosses love her, right? She's getting rewarded for being a really hard worker, but inside she's not really doing what she wants to be doing. So there's another part that feels like, I'm dying inside. I'm dying inside. I don't really love this work. This isn't what I really want to be doing. But the other part is like, we just got a promotion. We're making good money. People love us here. Everyone thinks we're amazing. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And, because that part was laid down with like, when mom and dad's approval was everything. It felt so good when they cheered for her when she was winning on the tennis court. But as an adult, that part's too focused on external approval. And then these other parts that want her to live more authentically are like screaming. And that happens a lot with clients that I work with who are doing really well in life, but like something's missing. And what's missing is they're not listening to other parts that want different things, different experiences. So that's an example of like the way the tension can play out real time.
Very well said. I think in both of those cases, you gave really great examples of, parts of ourselves that are formed when we were young
Yeah.
that then no longer serve us in these ways and lead to, massive amounts of internal and potentially external conflict.
Yeah.
Um, and I also love what you said about how internal family systems is
Yeah.
non-pathologizing, and it sees every part as having a purpose, right? And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about
Oh,
IFS is that
yes.
there's an understanding of how these parts form, the role that these parts have played for us, and how sacred that is, that they are a part of us and they have done such important work for us throughout our lives. And I think, like, just emotionally, as I'm speaking about it right now, it makes my heart swell up,
Yeah.
and it's one of the things I appreciate most about IFS.
Yeah.
Um, and we've talked a lot about these issues and of parts in conflict and of these younger parts that are kind of taking over and running the show later in our lives. But we haven't really talked about IFS yet, and how IFS helps address this. So I want to dig into that now and start to transition over. If you could tell listeners, what is IFS?
So IFS is a model. Like, so it is a model that we're laying on top of human experience, like just about everything else is. And it's also a paradigm, like it's also a way to understand and experience reality real time. And that's partly what I love about it as well, is like I live in this paradigm of IFS. So if someone is unpleasant to me, like I may have a reactive part, but deep down inside, I understand, like, yeah, they're in a part, like they're in a reactive part, they're hurting. And as you said, it's that non-pathologizing nature. It's like, so it's a way to understand myself and it's a way to understand humans. And you can really understand through the paradigm of IFS, it takes a lot of the blame and judgment out of um, what most of us walk around with, like blaming other people, blaming the external world. So it's a way to find peace in the human experience, which isn't easy to find. There's a reason everybody's so distracted on social media and cell phones. Like we tend to not do well when we just are sitting with ourselves. And for me and clients, IFS gives a model of like, wait a minute, instead of like being so externally focused and drawn by the seductions of everything that's wanting our attention, I can actually go inside and pay attention to how am I doing? How are things going on in there? Like, how am I doing right now in this interview? Okay, yeah, there's a part that's a little bit nervous. Like, yeah, I get it. It makes sense that you're here. Yeah, so it's a way to come home. That's fundamentally why I love it. And it's a way to make sense of what happens inside of me when I come home in a way that's very honoring and loving. And I love it. And I'm glad you love it too, Sean. Like I'm psyched to be being interviewed by and get to feel our mutual like appreciation for this model and this paradigm. It's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you said it well. I mean, it really is a worldview.
Yeah.
You know, it shaped my entire
Ah,
perspective of
nice.
how I view myself and other people, right? Like you were saying, like I can have a lot of compassion for other people because I understand, this is coming from a part of them, right?
Yeah.
And I may not exactly understand how that part formed, but I can relate in understanding, hey, I do a lot of things that don't necessarily serve me or the people in my life
Yeah.
that have come from these parts, right? And so it gives me that level of compassion, right? And I think you also said it really well that internal family systems is a model for how we sit with our emotions and our parts and our internal experience.
Yeah.
And in that way, it's immensely powerful.
Yeah.
It's like the what was it? I think it was Hemingway that said, "Do I conflict myself? If yes, I'm a man. I contain multitudes."
Right.
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 Um,
Right.
and right, so we have many parts, many conflicting emotions and things happening in a given moment, and IFS provides this model for how do I have these different aspects of myself relate to each other in a healthy way, and so I want to get into how we do that, right? So we've talked about IFS is
Mhm.
non-pathologizing. IFS recognizes parts, right? And that every part comes from, place and it forms at a different stage in our lives. So what are the other aspects of IFS that we haven't touched on yet that are important for people to know in order to understand the model?
Mhm. So IFS is an internal attachment model. So the idea is that we have parts that are in conflict and they're struggling with each other. Right? And it's a little bit like two siblings can struggle and if mom and dad are working all the time and they're not present. And so the idea is that you become the leader of your internal system. So a metaphor that I like to use is imagine a classroom of like seventh graders and there's a teacher who's really meek and really not present. And so what happens in that situation is the behavior of the seventh graders gets a little bit out of control. Like they can't feel that there's a strong lead in the front of the classroom. So they're fighting amongst themselves. Some kids will try to lead, some will pull away, but there's chaos. And the moment that like that teacher comes in uh, and stands in front of the classroom and like owns the space and in a kind of a caring way also, the kids will naturally fall into line and look to the teacher to lead. And so the goal of IFS is I help my clients get to know their parts. And as they get to know their parts, they build relationship with their parts, and the parts start to trust them, right? So instead of there being the two conflicts, there's this self-led adult that we all can be, that is understanding where both sides are coming from, and in understanding and caring and appreciating the positive intentions of both sides, there'll be a settling. It's like, the fighting stops because there's a presence, there's an adult presence that's there that then is leading the system. That makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the teacher in the classroom metaphor. It's a very powerful metaphor.
Mhm.
So we have these parts, right? They're at conflict with each other. And when we just allow these parts to run the classroom, all chaos breaks loose,
Yeah.
right? So the adult, the teacher needs to step in and help facilitate this discussion.
Yeah.
I want to make this really practical now because I feel like IFS is most impactful when you get concrete examples and when you see it in practice.
Yeah.
So can you give us an example or take us through an example of how this parent or this teacher comes in and facilitates this conflict resolution between these parts?
Yeah. So I'll use the example I did before where uh, the woman is doing really, really well at work and she's being rewarded for it. And there are parts that are loving that, but then there are other parts that aren't feeling satisfied at the job. So usually a client like this will come in and she'll just, uh, she'll say like, oh, I'm doing so well at my job, da da da, but I don't like my job, right? I don't want to be at my job, but I also love the money of the job. So I'll be able to see right away the parts that are struggling.
Can you name the parts in this one again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a part that, loves mom and dad, like being proud when she was winning at tennis. And like she loves the external world saying, you're amazing. So there's a part that like, I love that. So I'm going to work my ass off and get into a good college. I'm going to overachieve. I'm going to do all the things that you're supposed to do to get approval and to get a good job and to have higher status. Like, I want that life and I'm going to work my ass off to get it. Like, that's my goal, is to win. So that's one part that came in that you can see served her really well because she did do really well at school. Like, she's highly motivated, she's driven, she's successful, right? So that's one part or cluster of parts. And then there are other parts that are over here being like, oh my God, like I don't like this at all. Like I want to sing. I like being in the school play. Like I like being creative. And man, like this life of like 60-hour work weeks and like none of this feels good for me. And so she comes in and she says, yeah, I'm feeling kind of empty inside. I'm feeling like I have this great life, but I'm not being touched by life. I'm not excited. I feel like I'm just going through the motions and putting on a smiling face, and people seem to love it, but I feel empty inside. So that would be like the presenting problem. So the first thing we would do is I would say, okay, so there's some parts of you that really love achieving. They've done really well. So I'm helping her unblend from the part. Like, you're not this part because you can come into a relationship with this part. And she'll say, yeah, I have done really well. Yeah. So can you appreciate that these parts of you have worked really hard to help you be successful? Like, they're amazing, right? Like, look how well you're doing and look how much you're thriving. And she'd be like, yeah, I can appreciate those parts. Like, yeah, they're doing really well. And then can you also appreciate these other parts are having a hard time living in their world, right? Living in the world of achievement. And like, can we get to know them a little bit? Like, yeah, okay. Yeah. So let me have you go inside and find, maybe those parts live in your body. Maybe you get an image of them. And she might say like, yeah, I see myself just like painting in my room, being really content by myself. Like, I see myself, singing like I did when I was a kid in the choir. And yeah, and those parts, let's hear more about how they're doing. Like, yeah, they're not doing very well. So the parts will start actually talking to the clients and me in the session, and they'll let us know what their world is like. They'll let us know how they're doing. And so in that, I'm helping the client build a relationship between those parts that haven't gotten as big of a say-so in her life. But how do you feel towards those parts? That's another big IFS question. Like, yeah, I feel bad for you guys. You haven't gotten to just play and be carefree and innocent. Because these other parts have been so driven. Like, okay, so let them know that you feel bad about that. So I hope I'm giving a pretty good example of what it is to like build relationship between the client and their different parts. And always one of understanding, always one of compassion. Like I want the clients to understand where their parts are coming from and to appreciate that positive intention. So I'll pause there and see
Yes.
if you have any follow-up questions.
I have two follow-up questions actually.
Great.
So the first is, right, we're talking about these two parts that are in conflict right now because one of them, the achieving part is, achieving and doing what it's always done, and then there's this other part that is more creative and yearns for sort of more self-expression and creativity and joy through that. And then you're talking about that there's this other thing,
Yeah.
right? The parent, the adult, the teacher, that is having a conversation, facilitating a conversation with each one of these parts, but also between the parts.
Yep.
And so what is this? What is the parent? What is this teacher, right? Is that another part? What is that in the IFS model?
All right, I see where you're taking us, and it's where we need to go. So there's this concept of self in IFS, and I want to talk about this for a few minutes. And it might sound a little woo-woo to some of you listening, but I want you to bear with me because it's really, really powerful, and it's one of the things that sets IFS apart. And there's this concept of self that we all have inside of us, and the self inside of me is the same self that's inside of you. It's the same self inside of Sean. And an example of that is when you have an experience more of being in like the wave function, to use a metaphor of light. And we all know that experience where we just feel connected and you look around and there's a sense of like, wow, people are beautiful. And there's kind of a natural sense of caring and compassion, connectivity, courage. So we all know that state. And in IFS, we call that being in self. And so the goal of IFS is to move you more towards a place of being self-led. So I want to get the client in self and then get the client connected with their parts from self. That's what heals. So Sean, let me get your sense of this too, because I know you understand IFS pretty well. How did I do on the self explanation?
I think you did a great job. I
Okay.
think you did a great job. And yeah, and the I I want to, so I know some people who may be listening may not be aware of this concept of self, right? So I also want to give other ways because people might be wondering, okay, well, I can understand it from the description, but like, how do I get into self? Are there other ways to think about it, right? And I think
Yeah.
so. Some other ways that, or some ways that I've seen of getting into this state of being, or kind of bringing out the teacher or the parent, is in most mindfulness practices there's this concept of the observer,
Mhm.
right? And when we're sitting in meditation, in some practices we take on the perspective of just the observer, the one that's observing, right? And the self is kind of like a compassionate observer in a way. So that's
Yes.
one way that I've found for me personally, through some other practices that I've done outside of IFS, that I've connected with this self.
I have friends that like for them it's skiing or music helps them get into self or dancing salsa helps them get into a state where they come out of their kind of minds and they're in this spacious sense of connectivity to music, to other people dancing. So yeah, I think it's different for everyone. Mindfulness is one for me as well. Gratitude practices is another one, but it's a state. Like we're trying to shift our states into I like the particle wave analogy, like, wow, I'm connected to something greater. And self has these qualities, like you mentioned. It's not a sort of dispassionate observer, it's a curious observer, compassionate, caring, courageous. Like self has these qualities. So a lot of IFS is let's get you unblended from the parts. That a lot of people just think I am the parts. Let's get you unblended from them so you can actually see, like, oh, yeah, that's a part of me and that's another part of me. Okay, so I'm separate from my parts. I have some space, and then helping establish more of a presence in self. Yeah. So what's it like to be getting to know these different parts of you and understanding like how they're both trying to help? Like, oh wow, it's really great. Like I always thought that part, no, I hated that part, but now I see that it has actually just been trying to help me this whole time. And we're always working down towards the parts that are in the most pain. So the achiever part in the example I gave, the woman who came in who's doing really well at work, that part's terrified that if I stop achieving, I'm going to feel worthless, right? Because that's a big question you ask. What's this part afraid will happen if it's not achieving on a high level? It's a big question. It's a beautiful question. Oh my God.
And what in the IFS framework, what is that achiever part protecting?
Yeah. So almost always you're going to find there's a part that feels like I'm alone or I'm not, has a belief. And we call these parts exiles. They hold core pain in the system. So in this case, she found a 7-year-old that felt really alone and that she didn't get really any attention from mom and dad unless she was doing well. So that was the original painful experience is I'm all alone. And the story she told herself is mom and dad don't like me. They're not interested in me. So that's unbearable for a 7-year-old. Like that's unbearable. And so we find these parts at the core that are in so much pain. And then these protectors come online and they're like, I know how to keep this pain from coming in. Let's kick ass. Let's do really well at sports. Let's do really well at school. And it works. It works because that part doesn't feel alone anymore. It doesn't doubt its worthiness. However, it's only getting it from the external world. So it's dependent upon the external world for this really young part to feel okay. And we really want this 7-year-old to feel like she's amazing and beautiful and perfect, no matter what's going on in the external world. That's freedom. So eventually with me and this client, we work with this 7-year-old and she gets to tell us all the ways that she felt alone, that she felt like she wasn't worth very much, all those stories. And through connection with a self-led client, like she gets seen for her pain. So witnessing what happened is a big part of healing trauma. And eventually she gets pulled out of that time when she was 7 into current time through a very beautiful process that IFS uses, where she gets to be celebrated for just being 7. She gets to be supported for just discovering what she loves to do, not just what she needs to do so she doesn't feel alone and worthless. So that would be like a full example of like building relationship with that part, bringing her into current time. And then she just gets to be 7. And then the client gets access just to like an innocent 7-year-old girl that's just like wide-eyed and in awe of life and wants to play and discover. And that's what's been missing from her adult life as well. So that's kind of a full cycle of like a successful IFS parts process.
So getting access to the 7-year-old part, and it can take some time because these exiles can be so well guarded, and right, and it can be very difficult to get access to this part, because we may not even want to admit that that part exists, right?
For
A
sure.
lot of times these exiles are so denied of any light. I mean, it's appropriate term, exile. They're sort of living in the shadows and the darkness,
Yeah.
and there are these other parts that have taken lead in doing all of these things in order for just that part not to even be recognized in a way, which is it's kind of ironic, right? Because the protector parts form as a response to the pain that the exile is feeling, but then in doing that, the exile continues to be exiled, which is, sort of ironic.
Yeah, and that's what you see as the system starts to break down at a certain point. Like exiles won't remain quietly in the basement. They start to come in and take over more and more. So a lot of the work is with protectors, really honoring like, wow, you did so good in the way you learned to do well at tennis and be successful in life to keep this other part from feeling all this pain. So we always patiently honor protectors. And one of the truisms of IFS is the intensity of the protector is in direct proportion to the pain and suffering of the exile. So you get these, some of these men that I work with, they're like tough. Like I don't need anything from anybody, right? They completely exiled their needs, and of course their marriages aren't going that well because there's not very much intimacy. But that, instead of them just being dicks, like, wow, this is a protector that learned that like having any needs for intimacy didn't go well. And so we start working down through the layers, and eventually you're going to find a part again that like had needs and it didn't go well. Exile. Never again. Never again. So yeah, really, really parts in a lot of pain are really, really well protected. And even like I've worked with suicidal clients that like cut, for example, and like yeah, and that's also met with like, wow, you really want to stop the pain. So if you end your own life, you won't feel any more pain. Like that's beautiful. You're trying to stop the pain. Like that and imagine what that's like for a client who's in that much pain, who has a suicidal part, to be met with that kind of like honoring. It changes everything. Right. It's so different than traditional psychotherapy that might say, well, we need to sign a contract that you're not going to do that. Right. So whatever is going on in the world of protectors, it's like, wow, you're trying to help. Well done. And if there was a way that we could stop the pain without you having to end your own life, is that something you would want? Oh yeah, like if I wasn't in pain, I wouldn't want to kill myself. Okay, so maybe we could work with the parts that are in pain and help them. And then you wouldn't have to think about ending your life. And the protector is like, oh my God, thank you. Yeah, I don't want to do this. I don't want to kill myself. I just don't know any other way because the pain is constant and it's overwhelming. Great. So let's work with those parts that are in pain. And like it's such a beautiful, again, like honoring even at the level of suicidality, the positive intention of that. Yeah.
The example you gave there is tremendous.
Yeah.
It's yeah, and I think it demonstrates just how powerful IFS is, and maybe how different and radical it could seem through the lens of some modalities and frameworks, but it's the ultimate meeting yourself where you're at, right? And yourselves, plural,
Yeah.
where they're actually at, and the ultimate recognition of, hey, everybody and all parts of us are doing the absolute best that they can with the information and strategies that they know of, right? And
Yes.
starting from that place is the ultimate, uh, can be the ultimate shifter for allowing yourself and these parts to just relax for once, because these parts are doing all this work to defend something, right? So that's the thing I love about IFS. It's like, hey, no need to judge, no need to shame, everything's okay. Let's try to understand what's happening here and why it's happening.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I,
and
I would even say that differently.
yeah.
It's not even saying there's no need to judge or shame, because even that's subtly wanting a part to be different,
Mm.
just saying like, yeah, what are you hoping will happen if you judge and shame? I'm like, yeah, I'm hoping that if I judge and shame enough, like we'll finally start working harder and get a better job and have more money and then be more accepted. Like even those parts, which people hate, their critical parts, they hate them, but those are the ones that I love working with, because you can really get like, wow, you guys are really trying to help him succeed. You guys really want him to work harder. And if you bring the stick, you think that'll be the way to do it. But let me ask you this: when you're really critical of him, does it actually make him work harder? Does it motivate him to do more? And they're like, oh, maybe occasionally for a little while, but ultimately no. And it drives us crazy. Like, yeah, so what if there was a way we could work with the parts of him that are resistant around the work front to actually help you get more of what you want? Because he wants that too. That's something you would want. And they're like, yeah, if you have a way to get us what we want, we're happy not to criticize. Right. And so I'm making an agreement with a protector to step back. They'll get more of what they want if they're not criticizing, but I really honor why they're criticizing. And if they feel honored and seen, they'll step back, and then we can work with more of the true parts that are resistant that are going on inside the guy's system. So
Mhm.
yeah. And yeah, and 15 years later, I love talking about this because it's so relevant. And like you said so beautifully, it's like radical self-acceptance. Like we can finally exhale. There's no need to struggle in there and make ourselves bad and wrong and so much pain and suffering. And this is a way to work with it that's really loving and effective.
I want to help people recognize what, like, when these parts might be active for them.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm wondering if you could maybe list some of the most common parts that you see in your work. How can people recognize when a part is active or if one of these protector parts are active? And then we'll go into, what can someone do if they recognize that?
Yeah. So like stress is a common thing, or anxiety. Um, and what you can always find a part because there's something wrong. There's someone to blame. Like a lot of parts will come in and like they'll want to blame their partners. They'll want to criticize. They'll want their partners to be different in some way. Like if she was only this, then I would feel better. Or it's unfair that she's like that. Or he's pushing too much for sex, or like, so anytime there is a sense that something out there needs to be different, that there's a part activated. Now something out there might need to be different, and we're going to talk about that in the session as well, but we want to get to know what the part is that's hurting, that's having a protector come out saying what you said was wrong, right? So that's one example. Or anytime we're like self-critical, anytime we're in self-blame, that's always a part. And all of that has a semblance of something's not okay, right? My system is activated, something's not okay. And so parts are like, what's not okay? Is it me that's not okay? Did I fuck up? Or is it them that's not okay? Or my boss that's not like, there's a part that's always trying to figure out what the F is going on so we can resolve it. And that's one of the great fallacies of being a human, is that if we can understand what's going on and get the other person to see it, they'll change and everything will be okay, or will change and everything will be okay. So IFS says, hold on, slow down. Those are parts. Go inside. Right. So there's a part that's upset with your wife. Right. I get it. So get curious about that part. What's it want you to know? Right. Right. And then what's the deeper vulnerability? What's the exile underneath? There's a part of me that doesn't feel like loved or cared about by her. Right. That part got touched. Okay. So my job is to connect with this little part so he feels loved no matter what she says or does. So I'm going to feel him. Okay. Yeah. Oh, right. There's pain in my heart. So I'm going to connect with this little part of me, because the only way to ever feel at peace in this world, Sean, is to know that no matter what happens out here, we can find peace and harmony within ourselves. And most people are thinking, I need the external world to be a certain way, to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel valued. But then you're always a little stressed because the external world is always shifting. It's always changing. There's so much out of our control. The people we love and rely on, they're going to have bad days. So we become the steady, we become the constant. So no matter what happens, I can go inside and connect with this part and feel love for this part. And then he feels like he's okay. And then you know what happens? That protector that's all frustrated with the wife settles, because it's not really about the wife. It's about the little part that needed, that was in pain. So that's a big part of what I love about it, is it says it's radical self-responsibility. I'm going to be first for my parts, and then the world can be more as it is, and people I love can be more as they are, because I'm not dependent upon them being a certain way for me to feel okay inside. And that's the thrust of it, man. That's the central core of it. And that's partly what makes IFS unique as an internal attachment model. I've got me. And I use you guys as
One of the,
journal. I use you guys as journal for this. Like whenever I'm activated, I find that like it's an effective way for me to connect with parts. So I'm glad you guys put this out in the world.
yes, thank you for that. And
Yeah.
and we partnered with you to create an IFS journal within Rosebud,
Yeah.
so you can actually, give this a try. It'll help
Yeah.
you, identify the parts that might be present right now as a first step, and just generally journaling and going inward it can be a tremendous part of this process. I want to come back to something that you said, which reminded me of one of the other things that I love about parts work, but in IFS is I found that through the parts work and through the work that I've done through IFS, that as I improve the relationship with my parts, I'm actually able to better relate with the similar parts that show up in other people,
Yeah.
because I'm able to recognize them, and I've already created a more adaptive way of relating to that part of myself. And thus, if I see that part expressing in another person, I'm likely going to be able to have the same level of compassion and not get triggered or avoidant or whatever it is,
Yeah.
just because I'm witnessing a part in somebody else that I don't like within myself.
Right. And before you did that work, it's very easy to project parts of ourselves that we don't like on other people. Like, oh, that guy's cheap. Oh, but really I'm cheap, right? Before projection allows us to disown parts of ourselves we don't like and put them on other people. And now you're saying I can actually have compassion for other people who have similar parts as me because I've done my own work. And isn't it so much sweeter to have understanding and compassion for other people? Whereas before,
It makes it makes life a lot more peaceful, right? And
yes,
it makes it a
yeah,
lot more peaceful and a lot more honest, right? Because now if I'm with somebody, I'm I'm able to be there and see things rather than
yeah,
I mean, I'm always projecting. Let's be real. We're always projecting to
always projecting.
some
Sure.
degree.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit more aware of, what it is that I might be projecting, and I can be aware of what's happening within myself as I'm with somebody else, and notice if a part of myself is coming up right now as I'm sitting with somebody else. I think that, you know,
Yes.
keeping awareness externally and internally at the same time is the ultimate mindfulness practice. And
Yes.
IFS is it's like an exercise program for being with our internal parts and recognizing what's happening in a very nuanced fashion, which is what I really love about it.
I love that you brought that up. Yeah, I do the same thing. Like even in this interview, I'm like tracking parts of myself that are coming up. Like I was listening to music last night with friends. At a certain point, I was like getting tense in my chest. And I was like, oh yeah, part of me is overstimulated. So I went and took a walk and just like, yep, I got it. I'm with you. Always listening internally and responding.
So I want to round this out a little bit because I love the example that you were providing before of the client you had that had the achiever part, and then there's the part that wanted to express, creativity and her joy for creativity. And you talked about bringing the self in and having this kind of open interaction with that 7-year-old part.
Mhm.
So how did in the IFS model, right? Where did you go from there? How did this situation shift and transform to a different outcome and a different way of relating for this person?
So the word I couldn't remember before is called unburdening. So these exiles carry burdens. And in this case, the 7-year-old's burden was, I'm not lovable just as I am. Um, I'm not worth very much. Mom and dad only care about me if I'm doing really well and achieving. So, and then the pain of that is really, really deep. So the burden of that is I'm not lovable as I am, which John Wellwood, an author I like, has said this is the human wound, is we don't feel lovable just as we are. In Western culture, we have to earn our worth. So this client's really connected, and then she meets this 7-year-old, and then she feels compassion. Like imagine a tiny little one not feeling like she's lovable, not feeling like anybody cares about her. It's very easy. Like I can feel the chills in my body to like open and feel love and compassion and care for this 7-year-old. And she feels that. The 7-year-old literally feels that. Likely the client will have her eyes closed and the 7-year-old will kind of like look up, like, wow, somebody cares about me when I'm not like doing well. And then yeah, she feels the client's curiosity. And then she starts to open up and she starts to tell her stories. She starts to share all the things she loves to do by herself, like her own uniqueness as a kid. And the client will very naturally like, oh wow, that's amazing. You're amazing. Like, I love you. So this bond gets built between the 7-year-old that felt like she was unlovable all her life and with the client. And eventually she unburdens that old story that she has to be performing to be lovable in a process we do. And then eventually she has access to this joyful, creative 7-year-old. So in her life, she starts being more creative. Um, she gets a different job where she gets to be more creative and collaborative, and it's not just about performance. She finds a better fit for her and all of her parts. So it fundamentally reorients people in terms of how they face the world. So much more is possible when the mission isn't to just achieve so a 7-year-old doesn't feel like she's unlovable. And a lot of people live their lives just trying to keep the pain from coming back in. They've exiled the pain, and the goal is to never feel it again. But the cost of that is living an unlived life or a partially lived life. So with her 7-year-old in current time with her, she has access to much more play. She's not living out these other parts. And then the last thing I'll say is these performance driven parts, they're usually relieved, like, oh my God, we're exhausted. We don't want to live this way. We don't want to dance all the time for people to get approval. It's not working for us in terms of our dating life. Like we're dating these self-absorbed men. So, the parts that have been driving are relieved. Once the 7-year-old is healed, they're happy not to have to take care of her anymore through performance and achievement.
I love that you mentioned that about the protector parts that are just like,
Oh,
finally, the jig is up,
yeah.
I can finally rest.
They're
Um,
almost always
and
exhausted. They're almost always,
yeah,
they want to be relieved of duty. But until that part gets healed, the younger exile, they don't know how to stop.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's so incredible because I feel like probably mostly everybody might have some part that formed at a young age in response to some trauma or, compound trauma.
Everybody.
Um, Everybody, right?
Yeah.
And we all go through and we're like building this house of cards to, keep everything afloat and,
Right.
running around. The protectors are just going crazy, whatever it is, achievement, staying away from, I don't know, things that might bring shame in
Or
some
or
way or bring
or
pain.
addiction. Like addiction is a huge thing
Addiction,
of like, yep, I know how to keep this pain at bay. Alcohol, weed, porn, all the things. It's just a
right?
part trying to keep the pain at bay. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the beautiful thing about IFS is that it fundamentally helps us integrate our entire in our life in a way. Because
Yep.
this part that formed when we were kids, like it's a part of us, it's a part of our story, it's a part of our life. And if we just keep ignoring it, we're kind of existing in like a sort of torn apart way where our parts are not all integrated. Our story of our life isn't integrated.
Yeah. And we're living in distraction and addiction. Like more and more, that's what I see is people are more paying attention to their phones, the external. And I'm saying, oh my God, you have this whole thing inside of you that no one taught you to pay attention to and how to be with. Like no one teaches us how to do this. And so IFS is a
Right.
great model for like, hey, you think reality TV is cool? Right? Like wait till you go inside and you discover the intimacy of your own complexity and your own beautiful unfolding. Like it's amazing. And that's what I want for
Yeah.
people. And that's one thing I'm glad you guys have Rosebud. It's like, yeah, come back inside and pay attention because what's in here is wonderful and it'll take you to incredible places. It'll help you integrate. And out there is just
Exactly.
empty promises, empty promises. You cannot resolve things externally. And that's all we do is try to resolve things externally. Another metaphor I like, if there's a bone broken in your foot that you don't heal, you just start to walk with a limp. And pretty soon, you walking with a limp feels like you walking. And people just get used to it. This is just who I am. It becomes a sense of identity. This is just me in the world. Like, yeah, sorry, I'm a dick. That's just who I am. Like, love it or leave it. But in actuality, that's just a compensation. And another metaphor of like if there's a cracked foundation, like that, you have to build the tower that is you kind of it's always a little bit wobbly. And so you're always trying to put more bricks this side to stabilize it, but then you have to put more bricks on this side because it starts to lean too far. And IFS says like, yeah, we're going to get to these parts that are exiled that everybody else came into being in response to as a way to try to avoid or deal with. We're going to get to that little one in there that needs you. You're going to love that little 3-year-old. She's been waiting for you for a really long time and it's going to be great.
Exactly. the House of Cards metaphor actually also works really well here while we're on this metaphor kick, because
We are metaphoring.
but coming back to, right, for the example of your client, and a lot of us have this, I don't mean to single out this client necessarily, right? But this is just a good example of a universal part that many of us have. It's like a house built on lies, right? Because the first thing that, when you're going back to that exile, is, oh, I need to do this in order to be loved,
Yeah.
right? That, it's fundamentally a lie, right?
Yeah.
But if we base our entire identity and all the parts that come after that on that lie,
Yeah.
right? That's exactly what you're talking about, being built on a faulty foundation, right? And that's why when you actually expose the lie, all the parts are like, oh, thank God, that was just a lie. That wasn't really true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's a big misunderstanding.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. She told herself a story which wasn't true, but it felt true
right,
based on the evidence and the experience she was having. And because she had a belief system about what was happening, she could do something about it. So she organized around performing as a way to not feel pain, as opposed to just feeling like I feel alone and unloved. There's nothing I can do about it. That's unbearable. It's unbearable for us to feel like, as kids, we're powerless, which is why kids tell stories like mom and dad are fighting because of it's, there's a part that says because it's my fault. And if I can just be a perfect kid, mom and daddy won't fight. And then she has a mission to help and to change things. But because without that, kids can't tolerate it. So yeah, they
right,
tell themselves lies, there's misunderstandings, and then they just go with it. And if it works, they stay with it until it doesn't work.
right.
So yeah,
And in
and
that
now
way,
we're
it's very understandable.
always understandable, always so innocent. And that's
Yeah,
the thing. There's always such just like innocence. You just wanted your parents to love you, of course. It was unbearable that you felt like they didn't. And then the relationship builds between a self-led client and their part, and then it changes, and then their life changes. Yeah.
so I feel like this is a great introduction to internal family systems. I just had one more question for you. For folks who want to learn more about IFS after listening to this conversation, what resources would you recommend that they check out?
Yeah. Uh, there's a book called No Bad Parts that I like. There's a book called Self Therapy that I like. And there's one called You Are the One You've Been Waiting For. So just see which one resonates with you. You can go to selfleadership.org. And that's the main center of internal family systems. You can look at some videos of Richard Schwartz on YouTube, get more of a sense of it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I love the titles of all of those books.
I know, right?
Um,
They fit perfectly into the themes.
cool. Well, David, very grateful. All of my parts are grateful for all of your parts. Thank you for taking the time today to chat with us about internal family systems.
Yeah, it was great. It ignited my already fiery passion for the model, and I appreciate what you brought in as well, like some different perspectives of your own experience with it and how it's helped you in your partnership. So thank you, Sean, and good luck with continuing to build out Rosebud. And I'm really glad you have IFS in there and you have a resource to help people go internal. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, David. Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, if you're a Rosebud user, check out the IFS journal in there. If you're not a Rosebud user, try Rosebud and look for the IFS journal under the Explore tab. All right. Thank you, David, so much. And yeah, looking forward to the work that you're going to do in the future. I can tell you have an insane passion for IFS, which was very
Yep.
evident on today's call. So thank you.
Yeah. You're so welcome, Sean. Pleasure. Take care.